The 1936 Olympics in Berlin was the first Games to be held with an openly political agenda. Berlin had been awarded the Games prior to Adolf Hitler's rise to power, and despite Hitler's lukewarm feeling towards sport, Joseph Goebbels convinced him that it was a prime opportunity to promote the ideals of the Aryan race and German supremacy to the world. The openly anti-Semite and racist view projected by the Nazi elite was not well received around the world, especially after the banning of all non-Aryan athletes from the German team. Many felt this was morally wrong and that the Games would be a celebration of Nazi Germany, which resulted in the potential boycott by the US team. Despite the best efforts of Goebbels to paint the Nazis in a positive light through the removal of anti-Semite slogans from Jewish shop fronts, the Games were ultimately only a partial success for the regime. Germany finished on top of the medal table and had made a favourable impression. However, the triumph of Jesse Owens, an African-American who won 4 gold medals, made him unquestionably the star of the Games. This, coupled with the women's high jump being won by a Hungarian Jew who jumped the same height as the excluded German Jewish athlete Gretel Bergmann a month before, undermined the Aryan image that Hitler was attempting to purport. The 1956 Melbourne Olympics was the first Games where boycotts were actually implemented, and as a result, only 3,342 athletes competed. Due to tensions rising in the Suez Crisis, Egypt, Iraq and Lebanon all pulled out of the Games in protest of the invasion of Egypt by France, Britain and Israel. The Egyptians felt that in light of the recent Israeli counterattack in the Suez Canal, that nations guilty of cowardly aggression should be expelled from the Games. The International Olympic Committee responded that the Olympics are a competition between individuals, not nations. Meanwhile, the Netherlands, Spain and Switzerland didn't attend in protest of the Soviet invasion of Hungary to quash the revolutionary uprising. These feelings of animosity famously spread to the Soviet and Hungarian athletes who expressed their sentiment in what became known as the blood in the water match. The water polo match instantly turned violent above and below the water, and the Hungarian 4-0 win highlighted that the politically significant terrain of sport still nourished forms of resistance. The boycotts and the Hungarian win combined underlined the connection between sport and politics, as well as the desire of many countries for domestic and national change, and how sport is an outlet for nationalistic expression. The 1968 Mexico Olympics is remembered as a permanent expression of international human rights and most symbolically African American civil rights. Even before the Games began, feelings of animosity were projected around the city by students protesting the increased political and economic suppression by the government. 10 days before the opening ceremony, a gathering of students was surrounded by the Mexican army, who opened fire, killing 267 and wounding more than 1,000. This created a desire for change which permeated the Olympic Village and was expressed by African-American athletes Tommie Smith and John Carlos during the 200-meter medal presentation, in which they famously raised one arm and bowed their heads in the Black Power salute. They did this to bring attention to the condition of blacks in the US and remove their shoes as a symbol of African-American poverty. After, Smith markedly stated that if I win, I am an American, not a black American, but if I did something bad, then they will say I am Negro. Both were expelled from the Games, which highlighted the injustice of society at the time, the corruption of the Games as a free and passive event aimed at uniting the world peacefully. Additionally, both athletes supported the Olympic Project for Human Rights, which protested racial segregation in the United States, South Africa and sport in general. Despite warnings from the IOC, further demonstrations continued, allowing protesters to feel that their cause was being heard into. The Munich Olympics of 1972 was intended to be an easygoing and relaxed affair. Instead, the lax security measures of the Happy Olympics allowed for the most chilling example of international terrorism before 9/11. The new era of international terrorism was ushered in by 8 Palestinian terrorists who infiltrated the Olympic Village on the 5th of September and killed 11 Israeli hostages. The Palestinian motive was to strike political fear into Israel in order to have 234 prisoners released from Israeli prisons. Golda Meir, the Israeli Prime Minister, refused to free them, maintaining the stance that they could not allow Israel to be seen as an easy mark for terrorists. As a result of the incident, tempers flared in the Arab nations, and Meir implemented Operation Wrath of God, a covert operation which targeted individuals who were allegedly involved in the massacre. This ignited the Israeli-Palestinian crisis, which has been simmering for years and permanently marred the Olympics as a terrorist target. During the 1980s, the Cold War was at its peak, and as a result, the Olympic Games were being tarnished further by boycotts. In the lead-up to the Moscow Olympics, the United States President Jimmy Carter issued an ultimatum stating that if the Soviets didn't withdraw their invasion of Afghanistan, then the US would not participate in the Games. This boycott also included Japan, West Germany, China and Canada. The United Kingdom, France and Australia also supported Carter's decision. All in all, 65 countries did not participate. This was the largest political protest in history and had little impact on the event, with Soviet troops remaining in Afghanistan for a further decade. In retaliation to the 1980s...
Created using Powtoon.